Chapter 39, The Stargazers, Antony's POV. After Hanyu's lunch arrived, Antony arranged the boy's hair and they settled in to finish his painting. Hanyu was a little more subdued than usual, but Antony didn't think he was angry or frightened, or at least not anymore. Antony was more relieved to have received Hanyu's forgiveness than he cared to admit, even to himself. He couldn't stop seeing the way the boy's face had paled before he slipped to the floor. It hadn't been as bad as the great snooping incident, but at least that time Antony had had the comforting sense of being the wronged party. This time he just felt like a bully. Theodora's approving statement that Hanyu wasn't afraid of him rang in his memory with a new edge of mockery. He knew better than to behave like that. He couldn't snap at Hanyu the way he would Marcus or Theodora, no matter how frazzled he was or how many unpleasant conversations the day had held. He mustn't ignore how much stronger he was, how much power he held, how dependent the boy was on him for his survival, how threatening his least little movements could be. He might forget those things in a heated moment, but Hanyu wouldn't. He hadn't even been that heated. He'd mostly been surprised by the direction the conversation had taken, though he knew he shouldn't have been. The boy hadn't exactly been coy about wanting sex with Antony, but still, today? Really? To add to the multiple ways the day was not turning out as he would have wished, his painting was terrible. Once again, he was completely failing to capture Hanyu. This engaged pose was better than the last languid one, but it still wasn't quite right. "Have you ever been painted before?" he asked. Not that it would do any good. He couldn't exactly ask the artist for tips. "No, my lord." Hanyu hesitated, seemingly wondering whether he should keep speaking or not. Antony was surprised to find himself immensely relieved when the boy plunged ahead. "Jen sketched us all sometimes, though. He's wonderful at it. Do you think he has paper and pencils here? Could I give him some?" "Of course." Antony was unsettlingly grateful to be asked for something he could give. Hanyu's smile was a little shy, but still genuine. How had Antony ever found it annoying? He reflected on Hanyu's answer. Maybe that was the issue. Maybe a sketch would do more to capture the motion and energy of this particular offering than a painting. He would have to give it a try. In the meantime, "All right, I'm done." Hanyu broke his pose and stretched, straining his arms over his head. He looked so funny with his face screwed up in pleasure that Antony wished he had some sketching paper already. "Antony, we broke the curse," the boy said happily. Antony was startled for a moment and pressed a hand to his chest. "No, my heart's not beating and my skin is still cold." Then he remembered his joke from last week. Every time they worked on this particular painting, Hanyu ended up bowing and crying. Real curses didn't break. Magic, once placed, could not be undone. You simply had to push through the remade world and deal with it, no matter how many hopeless tears you cried or how hard you wished. If wishes were fishes, Thad would die of joy. He'd forgotten that Sana used to say that. Antony used to grumble that it was a stupid saying and it didn't mean anything, and Sana would say, if scowls were bowels, Antony would be a little shit, and that was even stupider, and... Antony cut off that train of thought and focused his attention gratefully on the present, Hanyu, the painting, the curse. "Did we really?" he asked. "I think the curse is intact. You were bowing and crying before we started." "But not while you painted," Hanyu insisted. "All right, then." Antony rolled his eyes. "We broke the curse. We're wizards. Hooray for us. Do you want to see the picture?" Hanyu did, very much. A few clattering steps, and he was bending over Antony to examine the canvas. One hand came down on Antony's shoulder, impossibly large and warm. Antony glanced up, startled, but Hanyu's full attention was on the painting. The touch was apparently unconscious. He sighed internally and decided to allow it. "Oh, gods, it's so beautiful!" Hanyu gasped. "How do you get the silk to wrinkle like that? And it looks like real gold! You're amazing, Antony! I don't really look that pretty, do I?" "Don't be stupid!" Antony glared at the flat, lifeless thing he'd painted. "You look much better than this." Damn it, he growled that. Why was he forever growling and snapping? Had he scared Hanyu again? A quick glance up showed that he had not. The boy was looking down at him with fresh tears brimming in those big brown eyes, but, given his beaming smile, they were probably happy tears. "What?" Antony was still snapping, but this time Hanyu didn't seem bothered. "You do! It's so still and flat!" Mischief sparked through the tears. "Well, yes, paintings usually are, my lord." "Oh, shut up!" Antony scowled to hide the great swell of relief he felt that Hanyu was comfortable enough to tease him. "You know what I mean. The painting makes you look boring." No, it doesn't. I look like I'm listening to a story. Maybe that's the problem. Your mouth is shut. For a moment, Antony was afraid that the joke had cut too close to Hanyu's insecurities, but the boy giggled and Antony relaxed again. If there was a problem, it would probably be that, Hanyu said. But there isn't a problem. It's beautiful. Against his will, Antony's lips were tilting up at his attendant's vehemence. I do believe you're ready to fight me about this. I will! Hanyu's grin faltered a little as he realized his boldness, but just then Antony lost his battle with laughter. The idea of Hanyu pinning him down with his fragile human hands and bellowing, "Say it's a good painting! Say it!" was just too cute. It was cute. Antony's laughter was half mortification at the realization. When had he last thought of anything as cute? All right, he managed between giggles. I surrender. This is the world's greatest masterpiece. Generations will be brought weeping to their knees by its brilliance. That's right, Hanyu nodded firmly. After all, look at me. I'm crying already. Oh, well, if I could wring a tear from your stony heart, then of course. Hanyu stuck his tongue out at him. Suddenly, with a clarity more like sight than memory, Antony was overcome with an image of Titus doing the same. His little brother, sweaty and grubby from a day of tumbling with him and Theo and Claudia around Mother's courtyard, tiny dark face scrunched and pink tongue sticking out. It sent a squeezing pain right through Antony. Titus had been so small back then, so soft and round and defenseless. There was a knock at the door. Antony was glad to have his reminiscence interrupted. What was wrong with him today? Why couldn't he keep his brain clear of pointless memories? I'll get it! Hanyu scrambled away, and Antony was surprised to see him stop at the door and carefully smooth down his fine silks before he pulled it open. Oh, hello, Edgy. Hanyu's voice had gone as sweet and smooth as fine honey. Thank you for bringing me my supper. You're too kind. Antony was almost finished tidying his paints when Hanyu deposited his tray on the table. While the boy ate, he drifted over to his desk to check the paper. Nothing from Titus. A month now, and nothing from Titus. At this point, there were 4 possibilities. Either the paper had been destroyed, Titus's crew had run out of elves and gone feral, they had all been killed, or they had been captured. Antony knew that, for the good of all of them, the last option was the worst. If the elves of his homeland had learned about the island, they would most likely build an entire armada to keep the vampires from acquiring any further offerings until they're all weak from hunger and easy to wipe out. Objectively, it would be better if Titus turned out to be dead instead of that. Antony was shit at being objective. He wanted his little brother alive, feral and alive, captured and alive, a careless asshole who had lost his enchanted papers, but alive. Anything else could be fixed, but if Titus was dead, Antony wouldn't entertain the thought. He didn't have family to spare. He was restless now. He paced as Hanyu finished his meal, seemingly too absorbed in his food to worry about Antony's moods. That was good. Antony couldn't bear a 4th meltdown in 3 days. Just as Hanyu set down his fork, the gong sounded to announce nightfall. Antony was pulling his boots on before the last note had died away. You're going out? Hanyu asked. He sounded sad at the idea. Antony found himself a little saddened by it as well. He realized suddenly that he didn't want to be alone with this fear, even for the space of a walk to the upper deck. So are you. He blurted the words before he could have time to regret them. Maybe it was time he took a page from Hanyu's book. Put on something a little warmer, will you? Hanyu gave a little joyous squeak. Cute. All right, I'll be just a minute. Don't go without me, Antony. I won't. He should. He didn't. A moment later, Hanyu was beside him again, swathed in a heavy wool robe. Antony approved of the choice. It should be enough to keep the chilly night breeze from his skin. Come on, then. There were others in the hallway. Some of the vampires liked to rush up as soon as the gong rang and feel the railings for any final warmth the sun might have left behind, the closest they could get now to savoring the delicious, wearying heat of a sunbeam. Others were simply excited to enjoy the fresh air. Antony decided to break protocol and motion Hanyu forward, putting a proprietary hand on his back. He didn't like having the boy out of his sight in a crowd, even such a thin crowd as this. Lord Antony! He turned gladly at the sound of Thaddeus's voice. The mild vampire was accompanied by a human as well. Antony almost didn't recognize Dido with his face not twisted by terror. Hello, Thad, he greeted. Then, because apparently he couldn't help taking notice of humans these days, hello, Dido. How are you two doing tonight? I'm fine. Thank you for asking. Thaddeus looked back the requisite 3 steps to where Dido stood, clearly granting the man permission to speak. Dido bowed low. I am well, my lord, thank you. You honor me. He did seem to be all right. There was no stiffness in his walk or strain in his voice to indicate pain, and he and Thaddeus seemed at ease with each other. Thaddeus must have been telling the truth. He hadn't laid a hand on the man. Antony wasn't sure why that made him so happy. This must be the famous Hanyu, Thaddeus said, smiling broadly. Antony could have hugged him when he saw the pleasure brightening Hanyu's face at the greeting. Blushing, the boy stooped into a bow in imitation of Dido's acknowledgement. You're right, Antony said. Hanyu, this is Lord Thaddeus and his attendant Dido. Hanyu's eyes widened at the familiar names, but blessedly he managed to hold his tongue for once, only murmuring, It's an honor, my lord. I'm sure you're tired of hearing this, but you have the loveliest hair. Thaddeus's eyes were alight with interest, and Antony felt a strange irritation simmering before the other vampire went on speaking. It's nearly the same shade as the scales of the lesser reef shark. Have you noticed, Antony? It's almost their mating season, you know. I have a theory that they birth their young live. Unusual for a fish of their size, I know, but there is the precedent of... I'm terribly sorry to interrupt you, Antony lied, but we're on our way to speak with Theo. Never a free moment. Have a good evening. He hustled Hanyu along, but he was sure that Thaddeus was still in earshot when the boy whispered, What precedent did he mean? Are there fish that give birth? That's amazing! I'm sure I don't have the slightest idea. Antony didn't slow his escape. Perhaps you two can talk about it sometime. That would be wonderful, Hanyu enthused. Antony never would have guessed that his enthusiastic attendant would be happy to sit and listen to Thaddeus's litany of fish facts. Then again, the boy was irrepressibly curious about all manner of things. Maybe the two of them would strike up a friendship. Maybe more? After all, it was clear that Hanyu was a very libidinous person. Antony ought to find him a lover somewhere, and while there were few among his crew that he would have trusted with Hanyu, Thaddeus was one of them. Antony could escort Hanyu right to Thaddeus's bed and never have to fear that he would be hurt or disrespected there. He shoved the thought away. Tonight was about confirming their location with Theodora, not playing matchmaker. There was plenty of time to find Hanyu a lover or two. No rush. It was only a moment later that they stepped up into the fresh, briny air. There was a strong wind blowing tonight. Antony only hoped it was coming from the right direction and wouldn't blow them off course. He couldn't bear to lose any more time. He was pulled from his doleful thoughts by a noisy gasp from Hanyu. Look at the stars, my lord, he gushed, staring up in wide-eyed awe. Have you ever seen so many? And so bright! You could almost touch them! Isn't it wonderful? Antony opened his mouth to snap at the boy that he was here to find Theo, and he didn't have time for something as useless as stargazing. But at the last second, he stopped his words and looked up. Hanyu was right, he supposed. It was a fine, clear night, dark as closed eyelids and pierced with a dazzling array of stars. They shone fiercely, crowded together like watchers at a parade, reflecting off the dark water, barely visible from this part of the deck, so that there seemed to be even more. It had been a long time since Antony had stopped and admired a starry night. The beauty of it made him feel soothed and cracked open both at once, and almost a little teary. He turned to look at Hanyu, feeling a sudden, unfamiliar swell of gratitude. The boy was grinning up into the night sky. To Antony's eyes, unconstrained by the darkness, he looked half drunk on his view of the stars, his face slack and open with a totally unself-conscious delight that made him infuriatingly quite lovely. It's so beautiful, Hanyu whispered reverently. His hand crept out, seemingly without his awareness, and seized Antony's. Antony was too astonished to resist for the first moment. The next moment, he glanced around to make sure there was no one nearby. They had all dispersed over the deck. No one was close enough to see. Antony decided against resisting. Shamefully, he was enjoying the press of the boy's palm and the way it swallowed his own hand up entirely. It was both like and unlike the way his hand disappeared into Marcus's. Hanyu had none of his lover's ancient calluses, and he didn't grip the way Marcus did, tight and possessive. Hanyu's big hand was soft and warm and a little sweaty, and his fingers circled Antony's own so gently that it barely even made him feel held, though it still did. Was it because the human lacked the strength for a real grip? Was this as hard as he could press? But no, his grip had been much stronger when he hauled Antony out of his bath. Antony was charmed against his will to have his powerful, murderous old hand held so softly that it might have been a butterfly. Thank you for bringing me here, the boy whispered, finally tearing his gaze from the night sky to smile adoringly at Antony. Antony's heart had been a pointless lump in his chest for 1,000 years. Still, when Hanyu turned that look on him, he could almost swear it gave a painful thump. "Don't be ridiculous," he sputtered. Still, when he started marching down the deck towards the wheel, he couldn't quite bring himself to let go of Hanyu's hand. Instead, he used it to tow his offering behind him. Did every human have such warm hands? Even before the curse, Antony had always had cold hands, he remembered suddenly. His mother had always said that it was a sign of bad circulation, blood not moving as it should. There was probably a dark joke in there somewhere. His feet had always been cold, too. He used to put them on Valerius's warm legs in bed. He still remembered the indignant squawks and, "No! No memories! Not now! Not ever!" He pulled his hand out of Hanyu's grasp. Antony knew that Theodora was not at the wheel even before they reached it. There were torches lit, which she would not have needed. Still, his heart sank when he saw the broad, weary-looking man at the wheel. "Bunta!" Hanyu chirped happily. The man, Bunta apparently, looked up in astonishment, then folded to the deck when he saw Antony. "My lord!" "Get up," Antony sighed, trying not to let his disappointment and frustration color his tone. "You were busy. Where's Theodora?" "My lord no longer leaves Chihiro's bedside," Bunta said. Of course. This happened every now and then, when one of her offerings approached death, but lingered. Marcus always teased her about it. Antony never made him stop. Shit. Theo was worried about being a bad friend? If she didn't hate him down to the ends of his hair, it was more than he deserved. He got the coordinates from Bunta. They were exactly what he'd known they would be. He realized that he'd been driven more by a desire for Theodora's rough reassurance than any need for the coordinates. She was getting them there as fast as she could. There was nothing Antony could do to speed the journey. More broadly, there was nothing he could do. "Let's go back," he told Hanyu. "You need to get some sleep. You'll be back up here in the morning." A quarter of an hour later, when Antony stepped out of the washroom ready for bed, he found Hanyu already tucked under the covers. Not the covers of his own cot, but those of Antony's bed. He raised an eyebrow. The boy gave him the most contrived look of innocence he'd ever seen in all his long life. "Who, me? Somewhere I'm not supposed to be? The very idea!" Antony settled in wordlessly next to Hanyu, ignoring the boy's full-body wriggle of joy, and told himself it was because he was too tired to argue tonight.